What happens when one of America's most beloved entertainers walks into a hostile conversation and refuses to be intimidated? Today's story takes us inside a tense daytime television interview where Dolly Parton's warmth and composure collide with Joy Behar's increasingly sharp criticism. What begins as an ordinary interview quickly turns into a heated confrontation about appearance, success, femininity, and respect. But this isn't just a story about two famous women arguing. It's about boundaries. It's about standing up for yourself. And it's about what happens when someone who expected an easy target discovers they picked the wrong person. Before we begin, subscribe and let me know in the comments, do you think Dolly handled the situation the right way? The studio buzzed with its usual energy as Dolly settled into the guest chair, her sparkling jacket catching the bright lights overhead. After decades in the entertainment industry, she had appeared on countless television programs. Interviews were nothing new to her. But something about this one felt different. Across from her sat Joy, watching with an expression that suggested the conversation might not remain friendly for long. "So, Dolly," Joy began, offering a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You've been making music for, 50 years now?" Dolly smiled politely. "That sounds about right." Joy leaned forward. "Don't you think it might be time to update your look?" Her eyes moved over Dolly's appearance. The big hair. The sequins. It all feels a little 70s. Dolly's smile remained warm, though her expression sharpened slightly. "Well, honey, I've always believed that if something works, there's no need to fix it." She gave a small laugh. "And my fans seem to like me just the way I am." But Joy continued. "Don't you think you're setting the wrong example for young women?" The atmosphere at the table shifted. All this emphasis on appearance, the surgery, the glamorous outfits, the image you've created. She tilted her head. "That's not exactly feminist, is it?" The other hosts exchanged uncomfortable looks. One of them glanced toward Joy as if silently warning her to ease up, while another attempted to steer the conversation in a lighter direction. But Joy wasn't ready to move on. "I'm serious, Dolly." Her tone became more direct. "You've built an entire brand around looking almost like a cartoon character." The audience grew quieter. "Don't you think that's a little shallow for someone who wants to be considered a serious artist?" Dolly's fingers tapped once against her knee. It was a small movement, but those who knew her might have recognized it as a sign that she was choosing her next words carefully. "Joy, darling," Dolly said calmly, "I've never pretended to be anything other than exactly who I am." She sat a little straighter. "I write my own songs. I run businesses. And over the years, I've helped create jobs for thousands of people." Her smile returned. "If that isn't serious enough for you, well." She paused. "I reckon that probably says more about you than it does about me." A quiet murmur of approval moved through the audience. But Joy showed no sign of backing down. "Oh, please, Dolly." She waved a dismissive hand. "You can't seriously sit there and pretend that your success has nothing to do with playing into certain fantasies about what women are supposed to look like." Then came the line that made the room noticeably quieter. "You're basically a Barbie doll with a guitar." One of the hosts immediately tried to intervene. "Joy, I think maybe we should." "No, it's all right." Dolly's voice remained sweet. But now there was something firmer beneath it. "I think Joy has something she needs to get off her chest." She turned toward her. "Go ahead, honey." Her smile never faded. "Tell me what you really think about me." Joy seemed almost pleased by the invitation. "Fine." She leaned forward. "I think you're an intelligent woman who has spent much of her career pretending to be less intelligent than you really are in order to appeal to men." The audience went silent. "I think this sweet, helpless Southern girl image is insulting to women who fought for genuine equality." Joy's voice grew sharper. "And I think it's about time someone finally called you out on it." For several seconds, no one spoke. Even the crew seemed to pause. Dolly sat perfectly still. Her smile remained in place, but something in her posture had changed. Finally, she spoke. "Well, Joy." Her voice was soft. "That's certainly an opinion you're entitled to have." She paused. "But let me ask you something." Dolly looked directly at her. "How many literacy programs have you started?" Joy's expression shifted. "How many children have you helped receive educational opportunities?" Another pause. "How many hospitals or charitable projects have you helped support?" For the first time, Joy appeared uncertain. "That's not really the point I was making." "Oh, but I think it is." Dolly's voice grew stronger. And this time, the entire studio was listening. You see, while you've spent all these years sitting behind that desk tearing other women down, I've been out in the world doing the opposite, helping women rise. My imagination library has placed more than 100 million books into the hands of children who might never have owned one otherwise. I've helped create thousands of jobs, many of them for women. And throughout my life, I've encouraged and mentored countless young female artists. But apparently, none of that matters to you. Because you don't like my hair." The audience was completely captivated. Realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary, Joy opened her mouth to respond. But Dolly calmly raised one perfectly manicured hand. "I'm not finished, sweetheart." The room fell silent. "You want to talk about feminism?" Dolly leaned slightly forward. "Real feminism is women supporting other women, not tearing them down simply because they choose to live differently than you do. Real feminism means judging women by what they do, not by how they look. And real feminism means having the courage to be exactly who you are, no matter what bitter and judgmental people have to say about it." Joy's face began to flush, and for the first time, her usual composure started to crack. "I am not bitter." "Aren't you?" Dolly asked quietly. "Because from where I'm sitting, you seem awfully angry at a woman you've never even met personally. Simply because of choices that have absolutely no effect on your life." She paused. "That sounds pretty bitter to me." The other hosts watched the confrontation like spectators at a tennis match, their eyes shifting back and forth between the two women. The audience sat frozen, hanging on every word. Sensing that the conversation had completely slipped out of her control, Joy tried to regain her composure. "Look, Dolly, I'm not trying to attack you personally. I'm simply saying that the image you present sends the wrong message." "No, Joy." Dolly cut her off, and this time there was nothing soft in her voice. "You are attacking me personally. You've been doing it since the moment I sat down." She counted them off calmly. "You called me a cartoon character. You called me a Barbie doll. You accused me of being a bad example for women." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "All because I choose to wear sequins and tease my hair." Then she looked directly at Joy. "So tell me, what message does the way you're treating me send to the young women watching this right now?" Joy opened her mouth. Then closed it. Clearly, she hadn't expected Dolly to turn the conversation around so effectively. The studio was completely silent. The tension in the air was almost electric. I was only trying to have a discussion," Joy stammered. "A discussion?" Dolly raised her eyebrows in genuine surprise. "Honey, a discussion involves two people speaking to each other with respect." She paused. "What you've been doing is called an attack." A few people in the audience reacted with quiet gasps. "There's a difference. Although I suppose I can understand why you might confuse the two." Dolly gave her a faint smile. "Attacking people does seem to be your specialty." Whoopi quickly tried to step in. "Ladies, maybe we should take a commercial break." "No." Joy's answer came sharply, her pride clearly wounded. "Dolly, you can sit there acting all sweet and superior, but the truth is that your entire career has been built around outdated stereotypes about women." The audience murmured. "You giggle, bat your eyelashes, and sometimes act like you don't know anything when everyone knows you're actually extremely intelligent." Joy leaned forward. "That isn't empowering. Her voice hardened. It's manipulative. A collective gasp moved through the audience. But Dolly simply smiled. That same calm, serene smile. Then she slowly nodded. You know what, Joy? She paused. You're absolutely right about one thing. The audience waited. I am intelligent. Her voice remained calm, but there was unmistakable strength behind every word. Intelligent enough to build a business empire from nothing. Intelligent enough to write songs that have touched millions of hearts. She held Joy's gaze. And intelligent enough to understand that the way I choose to present myself does not diminish my accomplishments or my worth as a human being. Then her expression changed slightly. But apparently, I'm still not intelligent enough to understand why you believe it's your place to judge how other women choose to live their lives. Joy's face grew redder. Someone has to call out this fake persona you've created, she snapped. You're not really this sweet, innocent country girl. Her voice sharpened. It's all an act. For the first time, fire flashed in Dolly's eyes. And what if it is? She leaned forward slightly, her voice controlled but powerful. What if it is, Joy? What if I've chosen to present myself in a way that makes people feel good? Dolly's voice remained calm, but her eyes never left Joy. What if I've decided that kindness and warmth are better than cynicism and cruelty? What exactly is wrong with that? It's dishonest, Joy shot back. It's not authentic. Dolly let out a genuine laugh, bright and effortless, like sunlight finally breaking through a storm. Authentic? She smiled. Darling, let me tell you what authentic means to me. The studio grew quiet. Authentic is admitting that I grew up dirt poor in the mountains of Tennessee and worked every single day of my life to build something better. Her expression softened, but her voice remained steady. Authentic is acknowledging that I've made deliberate choices about how I look and how I present myself, because those choices open doors for me. She paused. Authentic is being honest about the fact that I've never pretended to be anything other than exactly who I am. Dolly placed a hand lightly against her chest. A country girl who loves music. Who loves people. Then her gaze returned to Joy. But what isn't authentic is sitting behind a desk and throwing stones at other women simply because their choices make you uncomfortable. The other hosts watched with a mixture of fascination and growing concern. One looked as though she wanted to disappear beneath the table, while another sat silently, clearly realizing that the interview had taken a direction no one had anticipated. Joy, however, refused to back down. You can dress it up however you want, she said, but you're still selling an image that tells women they have to look a certain way in order to succeed. No, Joy. Dolly's response was immediate and firm. That's what you're doing. The audience stirred. You're telling women that if they choose to embrace their femininity, if they choose to wear makeup, pretty clothes, or style their hair, then somehow they are less worthy of respect. Joy shifted slightly in her chair. You're suggesting that, in order to be taken seriously, women have to reject everything traditionally feminine. Dolly shook her head slowly. That isn't feminism. Her voice became quieter. That's just another kind of prison. A murmur of agreement spread through the audience. Joy could feel the mood of the room changing. That's not what I'm saying at all, she protested. But this time, there was far less conviction in her voice. Isn't it? Dolly asked. She leaned forward slightly. Because from everything I've heard so far, you seem to believe that any woman who chooses to embrace traditional femininity is somehow betraying the cause. She paused. So tell me, Joy. What gives you the right to decide how other women should present themselves? Joy opened her mouth to respond. But Dolly wasn't finished. And while we're talking about authenticity, maybe we should talk about what's really happening here. The atmosphere in the studio tightened again. You invited me onto this show to promote my new album and discuss my charity work. Her tone remained controlled. But from the moment I sat down, you've done nothing but criticize my appearance, my choices, and my character. She looked directly at Joy. Is that what you call professional journalism? The question hung in the air. Joy shifted uncomfortably in her chair, finally seeming to realize that she had pushed the confrontation too far. I was just trying to ask tough questions, she said weakly. Tough questions? Dolly's eyebrows rose. Now, Joy, a tough question would be asking me about the challenges facing rural education. She continued without hesitation. A tough question would be asking about the difficulties of running a business in the entertainment industry. Her voice grew firmer. Tough questions are about policy. They're about substance. They're about things that actually matter. The audience was completely silent. But attacking a woman's appearance and calling her a cartoon character? Dolly slowly shook her head. That isn't journalism. Dolly held Joy's gaze for a moment. It's bullying. The studio fell into absolute silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the camera crew seemed frozen, afraid that the slightest movement might distract from the confrontation unfolding before them. Joy took a breath and made one last attempt to regain control. Look, Dolly, I think you're misunderstanding my intentions. No. Dolly cut her off smoothly. I understand your intentions perfectly. Her voice remained calm. Your intention was to embarrass me on national television. You wanted to make me look foolish so you could feel superior. She paused. And you wanted to use your platform to tear down another woman simply because she makes different choices than you do. Dolly gave her a small, knowing smile. The only problem is. She leaned back slightly. It doesn't seem to be working out the way you planned, does it? Joy's face had turned a deep shade of red. Her hands were visibly shaking as she gripped the edge of the table. The other hosts exchanged worried glances. Everyone could see that the situation had spiraled far beyond an ordinary disagreement. But Dolly wasn't finished. In fact, it seemed as though she was only getting started. Joy's knuckles turned white as she tightened her grip on the table. The confident, confrontational woman who had begun the interview was gone. In her place sat someone who looked increasingly cornered. Dolly's voice softened. But somehow, that made her next words cut even deeper. You know what the real tragedy is here, Joy? Joy looked up. You had the opportunity to have a meaningful conversation with someone who has spent more than 50 years in this business. Dolly spoke steadily. You could have asked me about songwriting. About building a business. About philanthropy. About the lessons I've learned throughout my career. She gestured toward the audience. You could have discussed something that might actually have benefited the people watching this show. Then her expression hardened. Instead, you chose to spend your time attacking me because you don't like my hair or my clothes. The room remained silent. So what does that say about you as a journalist? Dolly paused. And what does it say about you as a woman? Joy's mouth moved, but no words came out. She looked desperately toward her co-hosts. But no one met her eyes. Even Whoopi, who normally stepped in when conversations became uncomfortable, remained silent. Finally, Joy managed to speak. I think. Her voice was noticeably weaker. I think we should agree to disagree and move on to another topic. Dolly tilted her head slightly. Oh, we're going to move on. A faint smile appeared on her face. Absolutely. Then she added. But first, I think you owe your viewers an explanation. Joy's expression tightened. You see, this isn't really about me at all, is it? Dolly continued. This is about you and whatever problem you seem to have with women who make choices different from your own. That's ridiculous, Joy snapped. But the confidence was gone from her voice. Is it? Dolly asked calmly. Because I've been sitting here thinking about the successful women you've interviewed over the years, and I've started noticing something. Joy stared at her. You seem to have a particular problem with women who openly embrace their femininity. The studio grew even quieter. Women who choose to be glamorous. Women who wear makeup. Women who dress in traditionally feminine ways. Dolly leaned forward. Why do you think that is? The question landed hard. Joy's face went from red to pale almost instantly. For a brief moment, she looked genuinely shaken. I don't have a problem with. But Dolly raised her hand. Yes, you do. Her voice was not angry. It was almost sympathetic. And that's sad, Joy. She looked toward the audience. Because there is room in this world for every kind of woman. She turned back to Joy. There's room for women who love glamour and women who don't. There's room for women who wear sequins and women who wear business suits. There's room for women who style their hair and women who couldn't care less about it. Her voice became firmer. But apparently, in your world, there's only room for women who make the same choices you do. The audience remained silent. Yet the energy in the room was unmistakable. Everyone knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. A powerful lesson in standing up to personal attacks without losing grace or dignity. Joy made one final attempt to defend herself. You're twisting my words. Her voice rose. I never said any of those things. Dolly smiled again. It was the same warm, radiant smile. But this time, there was steel behind it. Honey, I don't need to twist your words. She looked directly at Joy. Your words speak perfectly well for themselves. Then she began listing them. You called me a cartoon character. You said I was setting a bad example for young women. You accused me of being fake and dishonest. Her voice remained calm. And you claimed that my entire career was built on playing into other people's fantasies. Dolly paused. The entire studio waited for what she would say next. Those are your words, Joy. Dolly held her gaze. Own them. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Joy looked around the table, searching for support, but her co-host suddenly became very interested in their notes. Others stared straight ahead, avoiding her eyes. For the first time that day, Joy appeared completely alone. I think, she said quietly. Then, without warning, she stood up and removed her microphone. I think I've had enough of this conversation. Sit down, Joy, Whoopi said firmly. But Joy was already moving away from the table. No. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by someone who thinks looking like a living doll is some kind of achievement. Whatever composure she had left was gone. Dolly, however, remained perfectly calm. She watched Joy with an expression that looked almost like pity. And there it is, she said softly. Joy stopped. The real Joy. The studio became silent again. Not the professional journalist. Not the champion of women's rights. Dolly's voice remained controlled. Just a woman who can't stand seeing another woman succeed on her own terms. That was the final straw. Joy turned back, her face twisted with anger. I don't have to listen to this from some washed-up country singer who thinks she's profound because she can rhyme moon with June. A loud gasp swept through the audience. Even members of the camera crew appeared stunned by the outburst. But Dolly simply smiled. Then she slowly shook her head. And there you go again, Joy. Her voice was gentle. When you can't win an argument based on merit, you fall back on personal attacks. Joy stood frozen for a moment, trembling with anger. It was obvious she was searching for the perfect response, something that could restore her dignity and give her the final word. But nothing came. The silence became unbearable. You know what? Joy finally spoke, her voice shaking. I'm done. She removed the rest of her equipment. I'm not going to sit here and pretend this is some kind of professional conversation when this is clearly just an ambush. An ambush? Dolly looked genuinely surprised. Joy, honey, you're the one with the microphone and the platform. She gestured around the studio. You're the one who invited me here. Then she calmly added. You're also the one who started attacking me the moment I sat down. Dolly tilted her head. So if anyone has been ambushed here, I think it's me. But Joy had already made up her mind. She turned and walked off the set, pulling out her earpiece as she went. The cameras followed her briefly before cutting back to the remaining hosts. They looked as though they had just witnessed something no one could have predicted. Whoopi cleared her throat, attempting to restore some sense of normality. Well. She paused. That was certainly unexpected. She turned toward Dolly. I want to apologize for. No need to apologize, Whoopi. Dolly gracefully smoothed her skirt and adjusted her jacket as though nothing unusual had happened. Sometimes people show you exactly who they are. She smiled warmly. And sometimes, you simply have to accept it and move on. Then she looked toward Whoopi. Now. Her familiar smile returned. Didn't you want to ask me about my new album? The audience immediately erupted into applause. The tension that had been building throughout the confrontation finally broke. Dolly sat calmly, smiling and waving to the audience as though the entire argument had been nothing more than a brief interruption. The interview moved forward. And the moment left behind was a powerful reminder of one simple truth. When someone tries to tear you down, you don't always have to match their anger. Sometimes, the strongest response is to remain calm, stand your ground, and let your actions and their own words speak for themselves. What do you think about the way Dolly handled the situation? Did she stand up for herself perfectly, or do you think she went too far? Share your thoughts in the comments below.